Tonight on The Wrap, Prince Harry and his fellow claimants are slammed by a judge in order to pay almost £10 million to the publisher of the Daily Mail. Rising Up, a special report on the women who are reshaping the hard right of British politics. The Food Standards Agency warns the public to avoid runny eggs when eating out over salmonella fears. Argentina are fined almost £250,000 over a banner about the Falkland Islands they unveiled at the World Cup finals. I'll be discussing the day's biggest stories with the investigative journalist Susie Boniface and the political editor of the Critic, Henry Hill, plus a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's papers at past. Evening all, Matt here, Susie and Henry with me as well. Welcome. Now, Prince Harry's return to the UK took a bit of a knock this afternoon when he and his high-profile co-claimants were ordered to pay almost £10 million to the publisher of the Daily Mail. What do we think of this, Susie?
Well, you're not going to find a journalist anywhere in the country who says, poor Harry, this is a shame. The case was ill-conceived and the evidence that was presented to the court was so speculative that lots of people said, how did it ever get this far? There was years and years of preparation, and everything that a judge tries to do in a courtroom is to stop people litigating and say, do we need to do this? Lots of this stuff should have got thrown out before anyone near the court, and the fact it didn't and it lasted so long perhaps indicates how keen the lawyers were to push the case through, because if they'd started taking the bits out that didn't work, they'd have had nothing left. But I think we do have some sympathy for the likes of Doreen Lawrence, who is not a multi-millionaire, and who the Mail lawyers said may have been duped into joining the case, which was completely shoddy from top to bottom. But it's also only an interim payment.
Yeah.
He has to pay more in the long run. They all do. Yeah,
could reach over £30 million in the end. Henry, what's your initial thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, it's a good thing that this kind of thing happens because, again, the whole idea is that you're trying to avoid the misuse of the courts by the rich and powerful. Obviously, not everyone involved in this was rich and powerful, but a lot of them were. And what you don't want them to be able to do is bludgeon the media or anyone else into silence with the court system. So if a case like this is thrown out, while the number might seem very high and maybe some people's instincts would be like, is this an access to justice problem? Like, no, things like this are as important as a way of mediating the employment of the courts.
Well, Harry and 6 other household names that we've already touched upon, the likes of Elton John, Sadie Frost, people like that, were ordered to hand over the cash to Associated Newspapers after losing that privacy court case. There could be some better news, though, for the Sussex's finances, with reports that Meghan is in talks to star in a TV show. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock has more.
Harry's fight with Fleet Street is over, but his damning defeat against the Daily Mail has a hefty price tag. Prince Harry and his co-claimants are ordered to pay an initial £9.5 million within a week after overwhelmingly losing their case. They have insurance which covers them up to £16.2 million, but the judge, Mr Justice Nicklin, also ruled the publishers of the Mail can claim on an indemnity basis, which basically means they can claim much more. The Mail says their legal costs are £34.5 million, potentially leaving Prince Harry and the other claimants out of pocket by over £18 million.
It's a very bad day for the claimants. What they would have hoped for is a cost order against them on what's called the standard basis, but the judge has made an order against them on the indemnity basis, which means the final allowance in favour of the Mail will be much more generous.
The reason this bill's potentially so big is simple. Harry and his co-claimants lost every single allegation. The court very critical and said their conduct was unreasonable to a high degree, that allegations of the utmost seriousness were advanced without an evidential foundation. The Daily Mail defiantly described the judgment as a devastating critique of an attempt to destroy a newspaper and the reputations of its journalists, editors and executive.
Did your paper do anything unlawful?
But the paper might not end up with as much as they want.
There is a crumb of comfort in the judgment by the judge, who said those costs he thinks are excessive, will have to be carefully looked at. So there's no certainty at all that they will recover anything like that figure.
No comment from Prince Harry, but this has been a deeply disappointing case. The financial hit will hurt, but the greater pain for him, losing his chance to build a case for a second investigation into press reform. Now, he could appeal, but would he want another legal fight following his return to the UK? The Sussex bank balance takes a blow, but it might be boosted by news Meghan could return to acting.
All I'm hearing about it is that it is something she's very excited about. It's significant enough that it was something that was a big factor in this move.
We understand Meghan is in talks about a part in Guy Ritchie's Netflix show The Gentleman. Starring role or not, the arrival of the Sussexes is likely to bring drama. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
You know what, Laura? I think it's bringing drama already, isn't it, Henry? Look, it's only a couple of days that we learned they are planning to move back to the UK this month, and now we learn it's because of putting the kids in school primarily, and other people saying because they want to be brought up with British accents. But also, you know, there's a role on offer on this Netflix show potentially. There's also millions of pounds to pay as well. 48 hours and the drama started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my, I suppose, slightly cynical hunch as to at least part of the reason for this is that what Harry has learned over the past few years is that actually there is no lifetime's worth of independent celebrity as an ex-royal. For as long as they were in the firm, they are perpetually celebrities. It's sort of guaranteed. And they moved to America. They tried to trade off that. None of those business ventures have really panned out.
And it diminishes over time.
Absolutely. And so there's a bit of me that suspects that if your claim to fame, as it were, is your tempestuous relationship with the British royal family and the British media, being closer to both of those things is probably an easier position from which to occasionally stoke those fires when things are getting a bit tight.
Yeah.
So,
well, and also being a bigger fish in a smaller pond, because that's what we are, this side of the pond, if I can confuse you a little bit. What do you think about it?
I think, to be fair, and I do have some sympathy for Harry. I love his free spirit. I love the fact he's prepared to just upend the table now and again and exit. And when he married Meghan and decided they wanted a life out of the royal family, I was like, fine, go for it. Good for you. It is crap in there. I'm not surprised you want to be someone. And they made such a mess of it. I'm quite disappointed in them. But I do think, I feel sorry for them because when you are a member of the royal family, whether you're Prince Andrew, as was, or Harry, or Princess Diana, as was even, you have the security needs and the lifestyle of a billionaire. An absolute billion. Someone is absolute. You are too famous and too well known to do anything without a huge security contingent around you. You are a constant terror target and kidnap risk, and so are your children. But the royals do all that on the income of, in some cases, small military pensions, or, as you know, occasionally with some bequests and that from grannies, a low-level millionaire. And although that's more than enough for most of us to get by on, if you've got to fund £2 million, £3 million a year for your own private security detail and find £10 million for your Californian house and pay the mortgage on that and do this and do the other...
And a place in Portugal.
Exactly. You are dependent upon friends who are billionaires and millionaires who are richer than you, which means you're in someone else's pocket and you get accused of all this kind of, monetising your royalty and things like that. And it's like he's in a terrible catch-22 situation. He was born into it. It's not his decision.
Yeah.
And there's nothing he could do. He could go and be a private individual and just send his kids to the village primary school. It's impossible. Can't be done.
But
you know?
he might have a few more quid to his name if he hadn't been involved in this latest case. Do you think he got a taste for it, having had some success in courts earlier on?
To some extent. I mean, he sued the Mirror successfully, I think, which I used to work for. But he's not a terribly bright or self-aware individual. I think he and Meghan share an over-awareness of themselves and their own importance. They're both imperious and high-handed, and they don't think things through, which is why they've made this announcement very quickly. Apparently their children are going in school in a couple of weeks' time. Yeah. They haven't found anywhere to live yet, and there aren't any security measures in place for them. So their American security team, if they were to bring them over, they wouldn't have the legal right to carry firearms in this country. So that wouldn't work. He's got to have police security, And the Metropolitan Department, which provides all that, is well understaffed, and they've only got 2 weeks to find a huge team to police this guy and his wife and their children who are going to school. That is really complicated, and the people in the Home Office will be tearing their hair out.
How familiar are we with Guy Ritchie's series The Gentleman?
So I haven't seen the series. I've seen the film, which is excellent, and I've had the series recommended to me by
I can recommend it.
So, OK, excellent.
The first one's good.
I've seen it and I can't recommend it.
Oh, well, OK, well, everyone's a critic. But also, interestingly, the second series, I think she's being penned for the third. The second one is out in a couple of weeks. So, you know, the publicity machine around all this, it is, I think it's worth watching.
Yeah, but, you know, it's
Did you like the film?
Didn't see the film, it's the series. But it's been 48 hours, like you said, since this announcement. They're on every national newspaper. They've been on every headline. And yes, all right, it's August and silly season and everything else. But they are going to have this, and we are going to have this after they come back. And they will be, in theory, private individuals who are merely selling jam, acting, trying to get known and recognised and not say anything about Dad. And none of that is sustainable and none of it is going to work. So the national soap opera continues.
Hugh Grant was in the film, wasn't he?
He was.
Coincidentally.
Yeah, and what's the premise of the film? It's about hard-up aristos in need of a bit of cash doing things they shouldn't. So actually, it's an incredibly sort of opposite.
No acting necessary.
Yeah, absolutely.
No acting necessary for
If
that.
Guy Ritchie had any decent contacts, he'd just stick some cameras in Buckingham Palace and tell them to live and just film that and stream it. And I'd happily watch that one. I mean, we're watching it anyway, aren't we, really?
Yes, indeed. That story, of course, features on the front of the Daily Mail with the headline, Harry, Elton and co will have to pay millions to Mail. We'll have a full rundown of what's in the rest of the papers at past. Next, though, how an increasing number of women are joining Europe's hard-right political movements. It appears the concerns over immigration and women's safety are fuelling female-led groups both here in the UK and on the continent. Our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has been investigating.
It's here in Dover that some of Britain's sense of identity is formed. The white cliffs, the market's boundary as an island, the small boats that arrive here carrying migrants from abroad. But the voices that shape that identity, that are challenging it, are changing.
Stop their votes! Stop their votes!
Increasingly, it's women, including groups like the Pink Ladies, who are leading protests.
Mass illegal invasion!
Over the last few months, I've been spending time with the women's-only groups that are protesting against immigration. The starting place, they say, is women's and children's safety. But it also goes much further than that.
One straw will break the camel's back, and when that happens, there will be civil war.
This is a different form of right-wing activism with a very different image. Social media is crucial to finding new audiences and recruiting more women to the cause. And it operates across European borders. Some women bridle at being called far-right, others embrace it.
A lot of people frame us as the devil and just think that we're untouchable.
Traitorous governments gave out visas and passports like confetti.
Would I deport the Jewish people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, some of what you'll hear is uncomfortable, some of it is offensive. These groups don't look like the traditional far-right. And for many individual women, that definition simply doesn't fit. Lots of them are simply anti-immigration and vocal about it. But others within their ranks are committed extremists and are happy to exploit that gap.
Well, that's just a bit of a flavour of Tom's investigation. You can see his full piece by scanning the QR code that's popping up on the screen any moment now. There you go, scan that and have a look at Tom's piece. It's well worth a watch. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is here, has been taking a close look at this as well. John, tell us more.
Well, there are links between the Pink Ladies group, not to be confused with a breast cancer campaign. It used to be quite a similar name, I think. The Pink Ladies group is bankrolled, it seems, to a large extent by Rupert Lowe, who leads the Restore Britain party. In some of the pictures in Tom's report, you see banners with Restore Britain on them. Last November, he announced, Restore Britain has been supporting the Pink Ladies. We have funded the portable speakers, power, etc. This is at the rallies. These are brave women who are concerned about the impact of illegal immigration on women's safety in their communities. I'm delighted we can help. And then, not long after that, in February this year, he announced that one of the ladies we saw in that report, who is called Orla Mihane, who is the leader of the Pink Ladies group. Now, I can tell you, last year, she was a reform activist. She was deputy chair, I think, of Epping Forest Reform. She was going to be a councillor in the elections this year, in the local elections. But earlier this year, Rupert Lowe, hey-ho, I'm delighted to welcome Orla Mihane to Restore Britain. And she'll be our first official spokeswoman on women and girls' safety. Wonderful to have her on the team. Now, I'm not sure if we saw it there, but in the full report, we saw various other people. For example, there was a guy in what was described as mustard-coloured trousers speaking at a rally, I think, in Dover. That was Henry Bolton. Henry Bolton...
Name rings a bell.
Yes, he was the leader of one of the leaders... Do you remember?
One of the leaders of UKIP,
yes,
wasn't he?
After Nigel Farage quit after the referendum in 2016, they had about 3 or 4 leaders in a very short space of time. Henry Bolton was one of them. He was speaking at one of their rallies. The present leader of UKIP, Nip Tenconi, has also spoken. Now, the only senior Tory who I think has spoken at their rallies, Susan Hall, who stood for Mayor of London in 2024, spoke. Also, controversial figure Lucy Connolly, who went to jail over posts about setting fire, I think it was, to hotels, the Bell in Epping, I think it was. Also, Tommy Robinson has backed them. He's a supporter as well. And also in Tom's report, Lucy White was quoted in the report. She's a member of Restore as well. Yeah. Not much connection between Reform, more Restore. Can I just mention, finally...
You can.
James McMurdoch, who was a Reform MP and is now independent but wants to get back, he tabled a motion in the Commons saying this House commends the efforts of the Pink Ladies of Essex, standing up for the safety of women and girls in the community, and praised their courage and commitment. That motion was backed by, among others, Rupert Lowe, no surprise perhaps, Andrew Rossendale, now a Reform MP, Jim Shannon, perhaps surprisingly, the DUP MP, and a Lib Dem, bizarrely, from down in Devon.
It's all very blurry, John, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's clearly Rupert Lowe is right at the centre of all this and is bankrolling them. As we know, he's a wealthy man, a millionaire several times over, and providing all their banners and equipment and so on for their rallies. And so I think you can say we can link them to the far-right parties like Restore Britain. Oh, one name I forgot to mention, actually, Ben Habib. Oh, yeah. He was, at one point, Nigel Farage's, one of his deputies as leader of Reform UK.
They had a falling out, didn't they?
Yes. And he then started a party called, I think it was called Advance UK, which no longer exists. But Ben Habib. So people on the fringes of the right of British politics, very closely involved.
Interesting. When we were talking about this earlier, it jogged my memory. About a week ago, Nicola Thorpe, who hundreds of thousands of followers, former Coronation Street actress, but now she interviews people at these kind of rallies, was doing exactly that when a woman wearing a Pink Ladies T-shirt came in, questioned who she was, wouldn't give her name, and then seemed to go for her on this camera. And other people stepped in saying, well, she's got a press pass, you shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. It's worth having a look at to see how that woman behaved. They may disown her, but she was certainly wearing a Pink Ladies T-shirt that day, and the police stepped in as well. What do you make of this?
Everything that John said makes sense about how it's connected to Restore. And it also makes sense that those mostly men who have been at the front and centre of anti-immigration protests at different hotels and so on around the place would want to have perhaps, if you're trying to broaden out the appeal of your protest movement, you'd want to have some women to soften it, as they're often regarded as. And also, women have been the centre of, historically, some great protests, like the suffragettes movement, like Greenham Common, been women-only focused and achieved great things. But this isn't quite that. It's obviously being funded by men and pushed by men, regardless of what the people involved think. But also, I would just point out that although there's lots of talk about increasing radicalisation amongst young men on the far right of politics, young women are generally moving to the left and more progressive parties. All the research is showing that's the way political alignment is going. So this appears to be something that is unique in of itself as opposed to a trend for all women.
Hearing John speak there, Henry, something that jumped out was what was her surname again?
That's an Irish name.
Minahan.
Epping Forest,
yes,
where the Bell Hotel was. You know, you can understand if someone was living there or she was working there, why they might have concerns like this because of people being housed in those places.
Yeah, and I think that whatever you think of the Pink Ladies movement and the fact that they're getting some funding help, it's important not to just present them as cat's paws of shadowy men behind the scenes, right? Like, better or worse, these women...
They would certainly dispute.
Yeah, well, yeah, they believe what they believe, right? And I think that's important to make that clear. And this is the problem with any movement like this, right? As a decentralised movement with a relatively easy-to-adopt aesthetic, right, which is just wearing something pink, because... Often what you'll see with this kind of thing is it will be set up by some people who are locally affected, and then gradually what often happens on the far left and the far right is that often groups like that get infiltrated, makes it sound too organised, but they just attract who we might call the usual suspects, right? And it's actually incredibly hard to keep those people out, especially if you're not used to tracking, you're not familiar with them.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it only takes somebody, you know, one of those people wearing that T-shirt to do something incredibly awful, and all of a sudden, you're... And that's a challenge for any movement like that, because, of course, you do have a responsibility if you're any kind of...
Having its message diluted or tainted by others trying to get involved.
And you don't want to end up providing cover for people who are well to your right, who don't think what you think. And so it is a challenge for novices in politics who are organising for the first time, learning to try and handle those bad actors.
Thank you all. Next, the Food Standards Agency is warning vulnerable people against eating runny eggs in restaurants. Pregnant women, young children and older people are being advised to choose well-cooked eggs. The FSA has reissued the advice in response to a salmonella outbreak linked to eggs that have been imported from abroad. The agency says we are working closely with the UK Health Security Agency and other partners to investigate an outbreak of salmonella. The exact cause has not yet been identified. However, investigations so far have identified links to eggs imported from outside the UK, mainly used by food service and catering establishments such as restaurants or cafes, as a potential source. There is no evidence that UK-produced eggs are affected. This makes me think, John, of Edwina Currie.
I remember it well.
I bet you do. I bet you do.
We're all old enough to remember.
Sadly so.
She gave an interview. I remember I was working at the Sunday Times at the time, back in the 80s. And she gave an interview, and I think the quote was something like, sadly, a lot of our eggs are infected with salmonella, or something like that. She was Junior Health Minister. Kenneth Clarke was then Secretary of State for Health, and they didn't get on brilliantly, and she ended up having to go. And later on, actually...
Egg on her face.
Yeah, just later on, actually, she was offered, in a future reshuffle, she was offered a job as, I think it was Prisons Minister, which was then in the Home Office under Ken Clarke. No, thank you. She didn't want to work under Ken Clarke again.
If you're talking cultural references and old enough to remember Edwina Currie, when you're talking Pink Ladies, I was thinking about Grease, which just shows you how outdated as in the film.
Oh, the film?
Not the country.
Yes, I know.
I'm desperately racking my brain there.
You've seen the Pink Ladies in Grease, haven't you?
Stockard Channing.
Of course.
Yes.
Anyway, I digress. Imported eggs, this is, and some of the advice is ask about them being British eggs, which do have a little stamp on them.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's an interesting thing about when you look at international supply chains, because obviously, you know, there's no shortage of eggs in Britain, right? And so if you're a restaurant that sources locally, and locally, I'm not using that in, like, you know, farm to fork, 20 miles, but, you know, anywhere around, this won't be a problem. But what tends to happen is if you're a big chain and you're using something like, I don't think they operate here, but in America it'd be something like Cisco, where you've got an international, you know, supply chain all down to the wire, all about crushing those margins down as low as possible. I mean, on the one hand, that delivers you the lowest possible price that you can on a lot of things, but it does mean that you end up with this kind of downside risk, which is where you've got a system where a local one, even if there's salmonella outbreak in one area, if your distribution is only so much, other areas are fine. If you've got a massive integrated food supply chain, then a salmonella outbreak somewhere can affect country after country after country.
Because we've seen in the US in recent months, Susie, they've had outbreaks of illnesses, salmonella and other things caused by salads as well. And, you know, as...
And by Trump firing all the people who are in charge of public health, which didn't help.
I was going to ask you about that, but, you know, when you hear how these supply chains, as Henry ably explained there, can affect us here, it makes you realise just how far afield things can come from.
Well, exactly. I think most of our eggs that we import come from Poland, and most of those eggs are believed to be safe, but they think that the outbreak may have originated in Belgium, and Poland gets some of its eggs from Belgium, and so on and so forth. But, you know, the fact is that after the Edwina scare, which caused huge losses across the British chicken industry, egg industry, we started vaccinating chickens against salmonella. So it's not just a case we've got the stamp, we have vaccinations. And vaccinations work, everybody. And so that's why British eggs are great. And if only it had been rolled out, then we wouldn't have this problem from elsewhere. Perhaps Belgium and Poland will come on board and, you know, join the new UK in our... become a new union.
OK.
I'm not sure that the Food Standards Agency have actually named the countries where the problem has come from.
No, they haven't been able to identify it because there are some concerns, I think, with the authorities in Europe being able to actually substantiate where it's from. But the belief is that it's originated somewhere in Belgium, they think, but then I can't pin it down. Is what I saw. Somewhere.
John, thank you so much for that. Now, Argentina's Football Association has been fined almost £250,000 after players displayed a banner referencing the Falkland Islands, or Las Malvinas, as they called it on the banner, following their World Cup semi-final win over England. It was criticised by politicians here in the UK when the protests took place last month, with the Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey calling for those involved to be suspended. It turns out a lot of the players who got into fisticuffs after the final from Argentina's side did get suspended today as a result. It was a real surprise that this came up after that match, and
particularly a surprise if you live on the Falkland Islands.
Well, particularly a surprise if you're one of those Argentinian footballers who plies their trade in the English Premier League as well.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out, Argentina never once settled those islands. Yeah. Never once in hundreds and hundreds of years. And the only body which did settle them and actually make a running go of them was the British, and it was because everyone else who had tried and just failed.
Well, that was before Argentina even existed.
Exactly. The people that live there have been asked and want to be British, and that is the up and down of it. And I feel the same way about the Chagos Islands, and I feel the same way about Northern Ireland and anywhere else, or Cornwall or anything. If you want to separate, or you want to have independence, or you want to join a different country, it's what the people who live there have the right to say. There's a right to self-determination. The people of the Falkland Islands say, no, we're British, thank you very much, we have red phone boxes, there they are, and we certainly have not, never have been, never will be Argentinian. The people of the Falkland Islands are a huge melting pot, genetically and ethically and culturally, but they're British, just like the rest of us. And that's the beginning and end of that discussion.
Henry, what did you think when you saw the Argentinian players unfurl that banner? I think it might have been given to them by someone who was in the crowd. And also, what do you think of the penalty they faced, about £250,000?
So I do not know enough about the scales of football fines to know whether or not this is
People are saying it's relatively small.
In which case, increase it.
Yeah.
It's about 3 seconds of earnings,
I think, well, one, it is really difficult in a country which doesn't really have massive patriotic fervours about much these days to grasp just the extent to which the Falklands dispute drives a lot of Argentinian nationalists completely insane. And so I wasn't necessarily surprised. I think I did have your reaction about, like, oh, hold on a minute, the Premier League is the highest earning football league in the world, and you play in it, and your fans are going to remember this. So that was slightly surprising. But the main thing I remember thinking was, like, my goodness, let Spain win in the final. And they did.
They did with interest. I don't think you're the only one thinking that. We will take a first look at what is making the front pages of tomorrow's papers in a moment. Don't go away.
jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
It is time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's papers. And the Daily Mail celebrates its court victory over celebrities, including Prince Harry and Sir Elton John, who were today ordered to pay the paper's publisher at least £9.5 million within about a week, I think, after losing a privacy case. The Eye hears that Harry and his fellow claimants could be liable for legal costs of up to £25 million on top of the court order, so that's around $34.5 million. And that hefty bill is also the lead story for The Times. The Daily Mirror says the Duchess of Sussex is being lined up for a role in Guy Ritchie's Netflix series, The Gentleman, which The Sun calls a crime romp. And The Star describes the story as lock, stock and two moaning royals. Elsewhere, The Telegraph reports the police investigation into Lord Mandelson's alleged ties to Jeffrey Epstein could soon collapse. And that's because the US authorities, they say, are refusing to hand over key documents. The Financial Times reports the UK's fiscal deficit grew to £1.8 billion in July. And there's more bad news for Andy Burnham. His top choice for chief economic advisor has turned down the job. Daily Express speaks to a French woman who says migrants are committing crimes in her village, where they've set up a launch site for small boats heading for the UK. Finally, The Guardian report MPs have accepted almost £400,000 in freebies so far this year. Let's start, Henry, with the Daily Mail, because they're saying they won, and they did, and of course they're going to put it on their front page.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it feels slightly self-indulgent, but you've had a good day, and there's no other news, so you might as well put your court win on the front. It's an interesting one, because a few years ago, Harry was having a really good run in the courts, and I think that the media or the press really felt on it, or looked like it was on the back foot, but that you can go too far. And essentially, the reason for this is that they launched a case, as Susie detailed earlier, which was essentially speculative is maybe a nice way of describing some of the stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
And the reason that things like this exist is to deter people from wasting court time, right? And it's not just about court time, it's also about the fact that if vexatious litigation, as it's called, it can be enormously stressful, it can impose enormous costs, which can be recouped, but during the process it can impose enormous costs. Now, if you're big and ugly like the Daily Mail's parent company, that's fine. But these rules also exist to stop rich and powerful people using the courts to sort of bludgeon their opponents into submission. Yeah. And the British courts have quite a bad reputation for this, to be honest, and especially on things like libel. So it's a very high bill. Obviously, the bill might come down, but there is a reason that that this has been handed out.
Yes, The Times, Susie, talks about the full bill, which could be more than £34 million. And as we were discussing earlier, I mean, that's a massive number. And sure, you've got household names like Sir Elton John, who we know has got hundreds of millions of pounds, although you never know how liquid they really are, and Prince Harry, but also others like Doreen Lawrence and, who's the Liberal Democrat? Simon Hughes as well, who, having to consider their positions. It makes you wonder. They obviously felt strongly about it to get involved in the case, but the ramifications could be disastrous for them.
Yeah, it could be, and that would be terrible. But there's another reason that there are some high costs here. I mean, the court has said that the judge has said that the 34 million appears to be, that's the maximum which the Mail has said is their side. And he said that seems to be a little high. I think we're going to land somewhere below that. But the fact is that in a 4-year legal case against a major newspaper group, a huge amount of time and money and resources has been devoted to fighting a case that should never have been brought, that should have been stopped by reasonable lawyers much, much quicker than it was. And that has, had the Mail lost, for example, I mean, even if they didn't lose, that has had an effect on their ability to do journalism. Their reporters have had to sit down and prepare their evidence. They've had to do witness statements. They've had to deal with the lawyers. They haven't been doing stories. The editors, the legal teams have been devoted to dealing with this. Had the Mail lost, Harry would be demanding they pay his costs, according to many millions of pounds, with exactly the same glee that the Mail is doing.
Well, the claimant's own legal costs are estimated to be at least £20 million
exactly,
as well.
And they'd be expecting the Mail to fund that. And that in itself, although Harmsworth, the guy who owns Associated Newspapers, and the shareholders in there have deep pockets, as you say, taking those tens of millions out of a newspaper group of any size is something which affects their journalism. It means journalists get fired. It means budgets are restricted, and it has a chilling effect on the rest of Fleet Street. So the fact that they've won this benefits other people. And to be honest, they did manage to prove repeatedly that their stories were gained from normal, standard, everyday journalistic sources, and that there wasn't any unlawful information gathering, or at least certainly nothing that could be proven in court. So, you know, if they didn't have a high cost to pay for doing that, you know, they would be, whatever you think of the Daily Mail, it would be damaging the freedom of speech and the freedom of press in this country had they won, severely.
The other story featuring Harry and Meghan in this case, is on the front of the Daily Mirror and also the Star. I think the Star gets headline of the day for Meg's Lock, Stock and Two Moaning Royals, pun on Guy Ritchie's film Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, of course, because the talk is she's going to feature in a series of The Gentleman. The first series has been out. The second series is out in a couple of weeks, apparently on Netflix. So it looks like she's being penned for the third series. It'd be strange, wouldn't it? See, I mean, we know she can act. She was obviously in Suits for a long time, which apparently her brother and sister-in-law adored. I'm not sure they feel the same way now, but it's going to be strange seeing someone we take to be royal, whether she's officially in the firm or not, acting on screen.
Yeah, it will be unusual, and I suppose this is the challenge for anyone who decides to step out of the royal role, which is that you're in the sort of firmament of celebrity without really having the means to sustain it, and so there is a gradual arrival, or less gradual in some cases, sort of arrival at Earth when you need to start making a living. And obviously, Harry, unless I actually don't know if he's too old to go back into the armed forces, but the military is really the only what most people would recognise as a normal role.
That's a pretty good question. Could he go back in?
Harry did.
Yeah. I think he might have to shave.
Well, unless he went into the Rangers, sergeants in the Rangers can have beards. Why do I know this?
Because you've got a beard.
But Meghan has an easier time of it because she has a previous career, and obviously she also, I think, is a royal man married. Was only in the firm for a few years. Has grown up as a more. We're obviously talking about California and Hollywood here, but like a more normal life. Yeah. And it will be very interesting to see whether or not Harry ends up having to find some work as well at some point.
Let's leave Harry and Meghan there, although she does feature on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. But their main story is Mandelson probe at risk of collapse, Susie. And this seems to be because the investigating authorities here, I think it's the Metropolitan Police, can't get the documents they need from their American counterparts.
Well, it's a confusing story because the more you read it, the more it sort of collapses. But the story says that the Scotland Yard have asked for unredacted versions of and further context around emails which the DOJ published in America, which led to Mandelson's downfall. These are emails that we saw, partial emails between him and Jeffrey Epstein discussing things that he'd just heard in government meetings, for example, when he was in government in about 2008. Now, the Scotland Yard have asked for the emails that go around that, the discussion that was around it, so you can see the full context of it. Because if you're going to have a court case, both prosecution and defence may well say, well, look, there's other stuff here that would explain this or justify it or somehow substantiate things. But lower down in the story, others in the Met have insisted the case is ongoing and they remain hopeful and that there will be a successful... There's nothing has stopped at all. And the DOJ spokesman in America says the Department of Justice has not refused to assist any jurisdiction investigating potential criminal conduct of Jeffrey Epstein. So it's a bit unclear quite what's going on. It's obvious they've asked and haven't got it, but all you need is a bit of diplomatic shove, one would have thought.
In response to this story, Sky News has reached out to the US Department of Justice and the FBI. So far, we've had no response. And, of course, Peter Mandelson continues to say he is innocent of these allegations. Let's have a look at the front page of the FT, because this is an interesting one for our economy, Henry. There was a deficit of £1.8 billion in July. Basically, the government had to borrow more money, which increased the deficit.
Yeah, and this is one of the I suppose the warning lights that I think are blinking under the Andy Burnham, who's had by most accounts, a good first month as Prime Minister. But it has been a month in which Parliament hasn't been sitting, he hasn't had to do a budget, and hasn't really had to grapple with the public accounts. And we're hearing things about, for example, unwinding the Starmer government's cut to the overseas aid budget and restoring the original target.
Yeah.
Very expensive commitment. And this is the reason that Starmer cut it in the first place, right? Which is actually that the public finances are being run right on the edge. If you read the economic and fiscal outlooks from the Budgetary Responsibility Group, whose name I've just completely...
OBR.
Yes, mortifyingly. Rachel Reeves basically looks at those. She assumed that everything would go well and then borrowed to the maximum possible extent. There is zero
wiggle room.
Zero fiscal headroom. And that means that you're suddenly... Because if you have a quarter of growth, that not only means more revenue, but it also means more revenue that you can borrow against in the future, like projected revenue. So actually, you're suddenly, if you're the government, you're extremely exposed to the numbers coming up, even slightly worse.
Which explains why, Susie, during his tour, the Prime Minister has kind of been saying, well, I'm making these announcements, but they're inexpensive ones. Also, they are in the grand scheme of things anyway.
Well, also, because he's ruled out having an early general election, that means he's got to abide by the 2024 Labour manifesto, which... Yeah. Thankfully for him, doesn't say anything too specific about anything, but does sort of set out some basic fiscal rules, which he said he's got to stick to. And also, of course, he's going to be waiting for the first budget on October the 28th, when try to produce, John Healey, some kind of rabbit from the hat that will do what Andy Burnham has promised, which is to ease people's cost of living concerns in the short term. But we have, as we were hearing today, greater weather patterns and problems expected over the next year with El Nino.
Yeah.
That will mean food and crop failures worldwide and people being hungry worldwide, which will affect inflation and the cost of living and growth. We've seen the Panama Canal closed because it's too low. That will affect international food chains and deliveries of various goods and items. We're going to have economic problems for the next few years, at least, which are going to be beyond Andy Burnham's control. So, he's got to be able to do something in that budget which is within his control. That will make a difference.
Still, it is almost the weekend gang, so don't worry about everything. It does segue quite nicely, given that what is being spent on the economy, into this story on the front page of The Guardian, Henry. MPs have already accepted 400 grand's worth of freebies this year. What are we talking about exactly? Tickets again, that kind of thing?
Yeah, essentially, it's tickets, it's invitations to events by usually public affairs agencies connected to the industry in question.
Yeah.
So it's one of the perks of the role is that if you're friendly with this group, or if they have an APPG, that's one of the really popular ones for doing something like this. Although that usually means that it doesn't end up in the register, so this clearly doesn't include that. It's tickets to music events, sporting events, cultural events, and so on and so forth.
Chelsea Flower Show for West Streeting, Ivor Novello Awards, it looks like, for Louise Haig.
Why?
OK, but
why? They have enough money.
No. This is where I'm torn on something like this, as somebody who thinks that, despite the fact that it was all true, if you're concerned about the health of British democracy, you maybe should have thrown the expenses files into the sea. Being an MP is a really miserable job these days. Like, you don't have any public esteem, particularly. You are deeply exposed on social media to any nutter who wants to shout abuse at you. It's proving increasingly difficult to attract talent to the House of Commons, because people who are... It's paid quite well by national standards.
Yeah.
But the kind of people who you'd maybe really want and historically might have attracted, people who've built successful careers in the private sector or law, they're increasingly... and so this is one of the very few things...
that they can get.
Things that garnishes the life of an MP. And so if you can demonstrate, for example, that there is a clear connection between somebody taking something like this and their legislative work or whatever, absolutely fine, you deal with that in the proper way. But do I mind that Wes Streeting went to the Chelsea Flower Show? Honestly, good luck to him, let him enjoy it.
Yeah.
No! No! Look, if you're on 90-odd grand a year, you can buy your own tickets to the Chelsea Flower Show.
1,800 quid, apparently they were worth. That's a fortune,
exactly.
Isn't it?
That's That's not how much it costs to go to the Chelsea Flower Show. I'm sure you can get tickets for less than that. It's the fact that someone is giving you a favour and expecting apparently nothing in return. I don't believe that. And I think you can afford your own. And I don't think there's any job in the world, no matter how bad it is, people on buses, people who are emptying bins, people who are fighting for their country.
Very quickly, though,
get this kind of thing.
Having the mayor as he was of Greater Manchester at your event, you don't expect him to pay to come along? I mean, it makes sense inviting people along to these things.
People invite someone along as a public dignitary to do the speech, to do an award giving, that kind of thing. Maybe give them dinner at the time, yes, and then you declare that you've had a dinner worth, 100 quid or something. But £1,800 worth of tickets to the Chelsea Flower Show seems insane.
Did he speak?
We don't know if he spoke. Maybe he planted something.
I neither know nor care. He didn't need a ticket if he was being invited to speak.
It is time. Susie's furious about this one. We'll carry it on during the break. In the meantime, sport up next, and how champions Arsenal eased to victory in the opening game of the Premier League season as they sent newly promoted Coventry home very much empty-handed.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek.
It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. James Matthews from Sky News. Can I ask, why was Ghislaine Maxwell invited to your daughter Chelsea Clinton's wedding in 2010? Maria, did you offer to President Trump your Nobel Peace Prize?
I presented the President of the United States the medal.
Free, wherever you get your news.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
David Cameron says that you should vote through funding for Ukraine. What do you say to that?
I really don't care what David Cameron has to say.
Did you stay at the apartment of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody? Mr. Hexton, does your past behaviour make you unfit to serve?
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block. James Matthews, Sky News.
It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir? James Matthews from Sky News, Mr. Mamdani.
I have to be honest, when you said you were from Sky News, I just got very excited. Could you repeat the question one more time?
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Time now for the latest from Vishali at Sky Sports News.
Bid has been tabled by Manchester City for Dimitar Berbatov in the last few minutes.
We've made an offer. I think it's agreed between ourselves and Tottenham, and now really it's about the Birmingham decision, I think.
City come in and you're thinking, goodness me, this is another statement from them.
When did you become aware that Manchester City had entered the race?
On the way to the Carrington, then I find out that City are coming in with the offer.
Are you on the phone to Robbie Keane saying, is he signing or not?
Yeah, a little bit.
Did you fear at one stage that he would go to Manchester City?
No, I didn't fear it.
If City had snatched that one right at the death, the noisy neighbours would have been absolutely the noisiest ever.
The question now is, which hospital is he going to have his medical? Is it Manchester City's hospital or Manchester United?
My agent is telling me, in the car, someone called him. He's in the front seat. Sir Alex is next to him. I'm in the back seat. So someone is calling him and telling him that. And I'm like thinking to myself, so how do I react here? What do I say? What is Alex going to say? And I'm like, Emil, no. You know where we're going. We know what we came for. Just one club here. We'll go for United.
If he sort of turned at the last minute and gone to Man City, then it probably wasn't the right player for us anyway. I was confident that he wouldn't go there in the end.
I do think they were trying to get under United's skin. I think it was kind of like, we'll show you. We can certainly challenge you money-wise now. Any player United would have gone for that day, that summer, City probably would have thrown their hat in the ring as well.
Why were you so set on United?
It was like the badge, it was like the history, it was like the players, it was like the legends, it was like the trophies, the manager, the fans, the stadium, the aura.
You definitely joining Man United tonight?
We go to Old Trafford where the offices were. I go in, I see the whole table full of documents ready to be signed, if needed to be signed, but prepared just in case. Then I go to a different room with David Gill, with Sir Alex, my agent, the lawyers. It was up and down through the corridors to the offices, people talking on the phone. Daniel Levy calling on one line and say, come back right now, we're not letting you go.
It can get frantic, and sitting here calmly, I wouldn't like to sort of give you the impression that you don't have to lose your rag occasionally, you don't have to sort of push things or get on with your lawyers or, you know, make certain phone calls. But I think ultimately, you know, if you're experienced in terms of what's required, you can get it done.
My agent is trying to convince him, no, we already had a deal. Then I took the phone and like, Daniel, please, we had a deal, I'm staying here, bam. Then he calls again, a bit more calm down. Okay, maybe we can work something out. Maybe the price was going up at times as well, trying to negotiate.
Thank you, Vishali. Let's take a look now at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
After a cooler and somewhat wetter interlude, mostly fine and settled weather returns over the weekend. But it is a chilly start to Saturday morning with some overnight mist and fog patches. Most places will be dry, but a few light showers are possible, mainly around the coasts. The rest of the day should be largely dry with sunny spells, and temperatures will recover to around the average after that chilly start to the day. Clouds going to thicken in the northwest later, bringing a few spots of light rain and drizzle to northern Scotland and the west of Ireland. While the bulk of the British Isles should stay dry, the odd afternoon shower is possible, especially for parts of Cornwall and also across the north of England. Sunday, mostly dry again with sunny spells and light winds, though northwest Scotland and the Western Isles will be cloudier and breezier with a few showers.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
The rap continues. At 11, Prince Harry and his fellow claimants are ordered to pay almost £10 million to the publishers of the Daily Mail. Back in a moment.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Big Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
Tonight on The Wrap, Prince Harry and his fellow claimants are slammed by a judge and they're ordered to pay almost £10 million to the publisher of the Daily Mail. Rising Up, a special report on the women who are reshaping the hard right of British politics. The Met Office says the next El Nino weather event will be unlike anything we've ever seen before. I'll be discussing the day's biggest stories with the investigative journalist Susie Boniface and the political editor of The Critic, Henry Hill. Plus, a look at the front pages of tomorrow's papers at 1:30. Evening, good to have you with us, Susie, Henry, good to have you too. Welcome. Prince Harry's return to the UK took a knock this afternoon when he and his high-profile co-claimants were ordered to pay almost £10 million to the publisher of the Daily Mail. Let's get your thoughts on this. Henry first.
It's important that we have the courts to protect the public from journalists when they overstep, but equally important to protect the media from rich litigants trying to muzzle them.
Susie?
Some of them aren't rich. We've got Doreen Lawrence, we've got Simon Hughes, former Lib Dem MP, who's already tried to distance himself a bit from the action, and I hope that their costs are going to be paid by the richer members of the litigation team, or, the insurers are going to pay for them, because they've obviously been led, to some extent, I think the people who led that case have led the claimants down the garden path thinking there was a case there when there really wasn't.
Yes, they do have insurance. It might not be quite enough, though. Now, Harry and 6 other household names, the likes of Sir Elton John, Sadie Frost were ordered to hand over the cash to Associated Newspapers after losing a privacy court case. But there could be some better news for the Sussexes' finances, a little bit anyway, with reports that Meghan is in talks to star in a new TV show. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock has this.
Harry's fight with Fleet Street is over, but his damning defeat against the Daily Mail has a hefty price tag. Prince Harry and his co-claimants are ordered to pay an initial £9.5 million within a week after overwhelmingly losing their case. They have insurance which covers them up to £16.2 million, but the judge, Mr Justice Nicklin, also ruled the publishers of the Mail can claim on an indemnity basis, which basically means they can claim much more. The Mail says their legal costs are £34.5 million, potentially leaving Prince Harry and the other claimants out of pocket by over £18 million.
It's a very bad day for the claimants. What they would have hoped for is a cost order against them on what's called the standard basis, but the judge has made an order against them on the indemnity basis, which means the final allowance in favour of the Mail will be much more generous.
The reason this bill's potentially so big is simple. Harry and his co-claimants lost every single allegation. The court very critical and said their conduct was unreasonable to a high degree, that allegations of the utmost seriousness were advanced without an evidential foundation. The Daily Mail defiantly described the judgment as a devastating critique of an attempt to destroy a newspaper and the reputations of its journalists, editors and executive.
Did your paper do anything unlawful?
But the paper might not end up with as much as they want.
There's a crumb of comfort in the judgment by the judge, who said those costs he thinks are excessive, will have to be carefully looked at. So there's no certainty at all that they will recover anything like that figure.
No comment from Prince Harry, but this has been a deeply disappointing case. The financial hit will hurt, but the greater pain for him, losing his chance to build a case for a second investigation into press reform. Now, he could appeal, but would he want another legal fight following his return to the UK?
The Sussex bank balance takes a blow, but it might be boosted by news Meghan could return to acting.
All I'm hearing about it is that it is something she's very excited about. It's significant enough that it was something that was a big factor in this move.
We understand Meghan is in talks about a part in Guy Ritchie's Netflix show The Gentleman. Starring role or not, the arrival of the Sussexes is likely to bring drama. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
You know, Henry, the cost of all this failed case for Harry is going to sting, but also because we know what he feels about Fleet Street.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of Harry's problems, to be honest, which is that he has a penchant for vendettas and feuds, which is impossible to sustain as a royal, given the nature of the role to an extent, but is especially impossible to sustain as a private citizen who isn't independently as wealthy as some of the other litigants in this case, right? Like there is a point at which you can afford to just lose tens of millions of pounds at court, and there are people who do that, and that's the reason the fines exist in the first place, is to try and dissuade that kind of behaviour. But he has long had this weird sort of codependent relationship, because with Harry, in principle, he's very deeply into privacy, right, for reasons that are partly understandable, and there's this, I just want a private life and all the rest of it. But on the other hand, he's dependent on media attention. We were discussing earlier, it's very hard to imagine. Meghan has this acting role. Harry's only quote-unquote real job that anyone else might recognise was within the armed forces, where he served with distinction. Yeah. But I don't know how old he is now, or whether there's a possibility of him doing that. But if you're Harry, how do you earn money if you have to, right? If you can't if you don't have the royal stipend, if you can't parley your celebrity into some kind of podcast or book deal or whatever it is, it's a genuine issue. And so he does have this strangely codependent relationship with the media, which in this case has led him to come a cropper. But I honestly suspect with him moving back to the UK that he will just keep picking this wound. And
Susie, it does make it even more interesting, surprising that they are moving back, having just lost this case, and now we hear about the astronomical figures involved in it.
There are astronomical figures involved in all of it, and I think we can all understand why Harry has an issue with the media, and he's got good reason to in some cases. But he's also lost sight of reality and how things actually work and self-awareness. And as someone, I mean, he has been out drinking with the journalists that he hates so much, and he knows them on a personal level to some extent. And to turn around and consider them to be your enemy, having done that, I think is just shows...
Oh, hang on, but maybe you can separate out the person from the job that they're doing.
Yeah.
There's a bit of that.
Well, I don't think he separates them out. I think the journalists do to some extent, but I don't think he does. And I don't think the journalists that have, been involved, been dragged through the courts unnecessarily in this or other actions are going to sort of have a sense of glee of, now we have, all holes barred going after Harry kind of thing. But the fact is that now he's moved back, now there are issues about his security bill and who's paying for that. Now there will be issues about police officers or what his wife is doing to earn money and things that she's doing, and they're going to celebritise themselves, perhaps, somehow, to parlay, as Henry was saying, into...
Which they've already done.
Into salary,
some sizable deals in the US already.
Where they're staying and whether they're on someone else's dime and all that kind of stuff. That now becomes a matter of legitimate public interest that is protected under, codes of conduct and regulations and everything else. In law, journalists now have a lot of red meat to chew on quite lawfully about Harry and Meghan, which is exactly the sort of stuff he always wanted to avoid.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think, his mother had a very good relationship with a lot of journalists. She had difficult times as well.
Yeah.
But there were journalists that she certainly did want to work with and saw the benefit of it. And I think perhaps he needs to mature in the same way.
I think you said the Daily Mail's not dancing with glee, but, I mean, to say they feel vindicated is an understatement. We saw that when the case was won and Paul Dacre posted that video talking about it. I mean, he was pretty firm in what he thought, and we'll see in a minute, it's on the front page of the Mail as well. Again, just thinking back to them returning to the UK this month sometime, Henry, he's going to be even more wary of the press, isn't he? I mean, understandably.
Well...
Maybe he's just made his peace with the fact.
Well, I don't think he's made... Harry? No. No, he hasn't. No, that's not the reason for my hesitation. I think he'll be wary of them, but as I said, I think that there is an element to which he and Meghan need the press. And this is always the tragedy with celebrity, right? Because celebrity, you do need the media. And it's lovely when everything's going well and you're getting the puff piece in the magazine and, oh, look at Meghan's dress at this event and all the rest of it. And then sometimes the pack turns. And that is honestly just the bargain that you kind of, the Faustian pact that you have with the celebrity media, right? They will lift you up and they will tear you down. But the tragedy of it is that unless you completely retreat into private life or you have managed to build up a fortune where you can do that, you still need them. And I think that's going to be the really interesting thing about Harry and Meghan's future relationship. Meghan can get, some acting work, but to an extent, they are dependent for the lifestyle to which they have become accustomed on the media.
Well, the tragic thing is they didn't need to be. If you wanted to not be part of the control of the royal organism, if you wanted to not be feed food for the media vultures, all you had to do was to go to the Queen as was then, or the King now, and say, do you know what, we're out. We don't want to be part of this, but obviously we can't go and get a job. We just need a house on your land that you pay for, we'll stay quiet.
Yeah.
Right? With very much the Prince Andrew mode of operation where he is at the moment.
Obviously for slightly different reasons.
But it could be done. You can avoid the media, you can avoid this need to monetise all the time, and you can have a private life, and you could fade away. If that's what you want, go and do that. But that isn't what he wants. They want to be front and centre, and I don't think they've quite come to terms.
I want to finish by asking about this codependence, because judging by the papers, they need Harry and Meghan as well, because they've been on most front pages for most of the past 3 days. I wonder if the other codependent here, and someone else mentioned it the other night, is the government. It's a useful distraction having this going on with Harry and Meghan. And, when the royals have been quiet, then there's more focus on politics. A lot of people argue we've had just too much coverage of too much politics in recent years.
Useful distraction for hundreds of years.
Yeah, so there you go.
Stop it now.
So what do you think?
Well, look, we used to be that what the kings and queens and the royal family were up to was a matter of politics and where your country was going, whether you're all going to go off to war next week or not, right? The days of William the Conqueror. And then after...
Well, that was pre-printing press as well.
Pre-printing presses. But, I know, it was still a matter of gossip. It was still a matter of a soap opera everyone paid attention to. And now, in the era that we live in, the royal families and their ups and downs become, I think, a proxy for our own families, the black sheep, the funny sister-in-law, the slightly racist granddad, whatever it might be, that we all kind of can identify with. They get married and hatched, matched and dispatched in what is the national kind of parish churches in London and all the rest of it, and we can identify with them and we watch them and we talk about it. Everyone has a view.
Yeah.
Henry, you came in today and said, I'm really offended, I have to find a view on this. But you've got one. Everybody has a view on this because we can find things to talk about in it.
Yeah.
And they become this symbol for us. And if we didn't have them, I mean, we wouldn't, if you said tomorrow, let's invent this system and we won't have humans, we'll make puppies do this, Britain would refuse because it's cruel. But we do it and we gain something from it and they gain, you know, a gilded cage. And it's horrible and I feel bad for them, especially when they're born into it. But it's the deal. What else are we going to do?
We're looking at ourselves. I mean, there are black sheep and there are black sheep in families, though, aren't there, Susie? Eh? Now, that story, of course, features on the front of the Daily Mail with the headline, Harry, Elton and co. will have to pay millions to the Mail. So, look, perhaps not gleeful, but it's certainly on the front page. We'll have a full rundown of what is in the rest of the papers in about 18 or so minutes' time. Next, though, how an increasing number of women are joining Europe's hard-right political movements. It appears that concerns over immigration and women's safety are fueling female-led groups, both here in the UK and on the continent. Our data and forensics correspondent, Tom Cheshire, has been investigating.
It's here in Dover that some of Britain's sense of identity is formed. The white cliffs, the market's boundary as an island, the small boats that arrive here carrying migrants from abroad. But the voices that shape that identity, that are challenging it, are changing. Increasingly, it's women, including groups like the Pink Ladies, who are leading protests.
Illegal invasion!
Over the last few months, I've been spending time with the women's-only groups that are protesting against immigration. The starting place, they say, is women's and children's safety. But it also goes much further than that.
One straw will break the camel's back, and when that happens, there will be civil war.
This is a different form of right-wing activism with a very different image. Social media is crucial to finding new audiences and recruiting more women to the cause. And it operates across European borders. Some women bridle at being called far-right, others embrace it.
A lot of people frame us as the devil and just think that we're untouchable.
Traitorous governments gave out visas and passports like confetti.
Would I deport the Jewish people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, some of what you'll hear is uncomfortable, some of it is offensive. These groups don't look like the traditional far-right. And for many individual women, that definition simply doesn't fit. Lots of them are simply anti-immigration and vocal about it. But others within their ranks are committed extremists and are happy to exploit that gap.
You can see that full report by scanning the QR code, which is on the screen right now. We had John Craig with us earlier on, who's been looking more closely at the links between the Pink Ladies and others who might be supporting them. He talks about Rupert Lowe at Restore, but, you know, others from various political parties and groups as well. What do you make of it?
I think I'll take what Henry said last time about this to heart. You know, there's people, if you're starting a political movement, you will attract some of the usual suspects and they will bring with them their own baggage as well. And so if you're in whatever part of the movement you're on, whatever side of politics you're on, you're going to be attracting other people who then all wear the same T-shirt and look like they're all part of you and then can start saying and doing some unpleasant things that you're not necessarily in control of.
Yeah.
But I think that people who will be funding this, and there are some people who are supportive of it, will have not remotely objected to having some women talking about rape and sexual abuse being the reason for this. And, well, it's not racism, it's about women's safety. And there's a decent argument for that. But if that is your principal aim, then I don't understand why more progressive people aren't out on those protests as well.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why everyone who is on those protests is only supporting one end of politics, because there are people on the left of politics who have some issues about immigration and the way things are being handled, and you can have those discussions. But it's tending to attract just one end of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you see Tom's longer piece, which you can do by scanning the QR code, as I mentioned, you'll see he talks to Henry, the leader there, and she's saying, we want to protect women, we're not happy about some things. But then he asks her about her discussions on ethno-nationalism online, for example. She doesn't want to talk about that. She says there's a time and a place. That's her prerogative. But as Susie said, the headline is this, but then you dig a little bit deeper and it goes in different directions pretty quickly.
Yeah, it is. And I think that sometimes there can be a slightly condescending view that women's politics are necessarily sort of lighter and softer than men's. When in fact women are perfectly capable of holding radical views. Now, as Susie said earlier, on average, young women especially are more radicalised on the left of the spectrum, although it's been quite a dramatic shift. When we talk about the growing political gulf between young men and young women, most of that gulf is movement by women to the left. But historically, in other countries and in other parts of the world, there have been radical women on the right. The French far-right party is under female leadership. I think has a potential female successor in Marion Maréchal Le Pen. So as the right and the radical right, the far right, whatever you want to call it, as it gets bigger, these movements tend to start with your angry young or not so young men. But if you get to a point where, you know, Reform UK is at 25%, Restore Britain is coming up behind that and has got 40,000 votes in Manchester, beat the Tories in 2 by-elections now. It's not surprising that you will start to see, if it reaches a certain size, a larger female element in that movement.
Yeah. It is going to be... The other thing is, some of the imagery of this, you're absolutely right, no one's thinking they softer in some way, but they're called the Pink Ladies, after all, and, you know, it's slightly jars with what the message is.
It's kind of almost infantilising themselves in a way by saying, well, it's a pink thing that we're doing, and you know, like breast cancer or ovarian awareness or something, or you know, one side of the chorus line in Greece. But I think, to be honest, there's a long history of very strong, powerful, radical female-centred protests, whether it's Greenham Common, whether it's the suffragettes movement. And they have historically brought people in from just about all different perspectives of politics to a particular cause. And they've had huge impact as well in time. So it could well be that what's now known as the Pink Ladies, could expand, theoretically, bring in other people and actually have some real impact. I think if it stays a niche, you know, on the right of politics or to one end of politics, it will remain niche and it won't have wider cut through.
I mean, do you find it... What do you think about the fact that it is a gender-based group here?
I think it's perfectly reasonable to have those discussions about immigration and asylum, and some of the nations and people that have been granted asylum who come from parts of the world where women's rights are non-existent.
But I guess the point I'm making is there'll be plenty of men who are concerned about protecting women and girls as well.
Well, a lot of the men that are on those protests that we've seen have got their own issues with violence and abuse of women and girls. Some of them have got quite long criminal records. But yes, there will be men that have concerns about, you know, daughters and sisters and everything else. And there are mothers, people like me, who would be concerned about their own families and themselves. And I think that's an important thing to be talking about in terms of the current immigration debate that people won't discuss. We don't discuss it. And instead of handing out a leaflet to migrants saying, please don't hit your wife in this country, is not an acceptable way to be carrying on. It's not enough. But I don't know whether, you know, that can really be said to apply to thousands of people, many of whom will be coming to this country because it's not the place where you hit women, because they want to come to a place that is better. And I think you need to sort of balance the two.
OK. Coming up, the Met Office says the next El Nino weather event will be unlike anything we've seen before.
jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
The Met Office warned today that the weather event known as El Nino, expected to peak later on this year, could be the strongest in living memory. It means that extreme weather is expected to batter the UK over the coming months. Sky's Shingi Mararike has been taking a look.
It's been a year of extremes, from droughts to record-breaking wet spells. And with a powerful El Nino on its way, there could be more severe weather to come.
What we see now in the forecasts is nothing like I've seen in many years of making long-range forecasts. And many of my colleagues from other centres are seeing the same kinds of things in their forecast models. So whatever's coming looks to be like a record event. It's the biggest thing we've seen in decades.
After the heat waves we saw this summer, the pendulum could swing from dry spells to torrential rain. Even though El Nino is a global weather system caused by the release of heat from the Pacific Ocean, its impact could be felt in communities like here in Hebden Bridge, in the form of wetter winters and more flooding. Businesses are used to the worst. Elizabeth Wood has run this pub for more than 4 decades. She spoke to Sky News one of the last times the town flooded. She says a repeat of weather like that could see her lose this place.
Some things we've never ever replaced because we haven't been able to afford, but you just take a step at a time and keep going. That's all you can do. I don't worry. I don't even look when it's raining to see how high it is, because if it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Jackie's hair salon has also flooded 8 times.
I don't think anybody could cope with that. No, not in a million years could anybody cope with that flood what we had in 2015. Even a lot of shops even had to close down and never reopened again, because they just couldn't do it. But it could happen again because we've got the river, and if we get a lot of water, the river comes up, that's it. I am worried. I'll be here ready for when it does come, if it does come.
El Nino is a naturally occurring phenomenon that happens over the Pacific Ocean roughly every 2 to 7 years. It pushes up global temperatures as warmth is transferred from the ocean to the atmosphere. Over the past few months, sea temperatures have been rising, as you can see here, with the growing red patch in the middle. This year is expected to rise over 3 degrees. The impacts of El Nino depend on where you are and what time of year it is. Here you can see how some areas could become drier and others significantly wetter.
El Nino makes certain regions in the tropics drier. One of those is South Asia, which is currently undergoing a rainy season, and also the maritime continent and parts of northern South America. And this is all effectively because of the El Nino pushes a lot of air up into the atmosphere. That air has to come down, and that in effect suppresses the ability of these regions to produce heavy rainfall.
The coming forecast and what we've seen here in the last few weeks are a glimpse into a challenging future, with a climate that is more volatile, impacting Britain and the world. Shingi Marike, Sky News, Hebden Bridge.
Well, ponder that one off the back of the summer we've had. Look at, we're just getting a bit of a respite from the heat at the moment. Temperatures back down to the average over the weekend in August. But, there could be torrential floods coming our way. The way of Hebden Bridge, that woman running the hair salon flooded 8 times. It's only getting worse.
And the next summer will be hotter than this one, probably, because the year after the El Nino is always a bit hotter. But I remember seeing on the news, I think maybe a month or two ago, that the government of Fiji had warned people to start stockpiling water because they were going to need it in the next 6 months. So governments have seen this stuff coming. They know that El Nino was coming. They knew that it was going to be the way the modelling has been going for some time. This isn't, although we're talking about it today, it's not breaking news. It has been bubbling away for a while.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of governments are going to have to really start worrying about food shortages, inflation, transport of goods and food around the place and products. And it's going to be very hairy, I'd have thought.
Yeah, El Nino is a naturally occurring phenomenon, but on top of climate change, then the havoc it seems to wreak is amplified.
Yeah, it's climate change, and it's also just an awful lot of other policy decisions. So, for example, if you're looking at flooding, it's the fact that you have building on floodplains. You have the fact that you straighten rivers for agriculture and so on, which means that they don't sediment up enough. On the wildfire side of it, a lot of it is that we no longer, in a lot of places, they've stopped managing an awful lot of these areas. And so actually what you'd often do is you'd clear undergrowth out, and so that you could have a sort of controlled burn, and it reduces the risk.
That was a big thing in California, wasn't it, with the wildfires?
Huge thing. And instead, if instead you just leave it and you end up with several years' worth of stuff that builds up, that's an absolutely devastating. So there are policy measures you can make, but as you say, absolutely, it's not helpful if that 3-degree increase is on top of an increase that's already happened.
It is time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's papers. And the Mail celebrates its court victory over celebrities, including Prince Harry and Sir Elton John, who are today ordered to pay the paper's publisher £9.5 million after losing a privacy case. The Eye hears that Harry and his fellow claimants could be liable for legal costs of up to £25 million on top of that court order. That hefty bill is also the lead story for The Times. The Daily Mirror says the Duchess of Sussex is being lined up for a role in Guy Ritchie's Netflix series The Gentleman, which The Sun calls a crime romp. Pretty apt. And The Star describes the story as lock, stock and 2 moaning royals. Elsewhere, The Telegraph reports the police investigation here into Lord Mandelson's alleged ties to Jeffrey Epstein could soon collapse because the US authorities are refusing to hand over key documents. The Financial Times reports the UK's fiscal deficit grew to £1.8 billion in July, and there's more bad news for Andy Burnham. His top choice for chief economic advisor has turned down the job. Daily Express speaks to a French woman who says migrants are committing crimes in her village, where they've set up a launch site for small boats aiming for the UK. And finally, The Guardian reports MPs have accepted almost £400,000 in freebies so far this year. Let's kick off, Henry, with the Daily Mail, because, look, of course they're going to cover their own success. They did it when the decision was made. They're doing it now in terms of what their owners are owed. What do you make of the way they've gone about it on the front page? Are they crowing? Are they gleeful? Or is it to be expected, this tone they've taken?
I mean, both. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
Well, I think sentiment will be running high. I think the press, especially a few years ago when Harry was first bringing some of these court cases, some of them were more justified than others, but the press had understandably attracted a measure of criticism and scrutiny for the way that some newspapers had conducted themselves. This was a deeply vexatious bit of litigation. Susie spoke earlier about how effectively the chilling effect that this kind of thing has on journalism, even if the newspaper wins, right? Because it's just a vast amount of hassle and cost and risk, and all of that gets priced in when an editor is considering whether or not it's worth running a story, right? It's not necessarily like, will we certainly lose in court? It's just, the X risk on this story is this.
Yeah.
You know, I've got the proprietor breathing down my neck. So I think it's fair enough. They won. It was a case that shouldn't have been brought.
Which is exactly what it says inside the Eye. Susie, judge essentially says the case was without merit, and they were effectively chancing it, berates the lack of disciplined presentation the court was entitled to. Not a strong case, then, far from it.
No, he says, you know, that the way that the claims, the manner in which they're brought, pleaded, pursued, maintained and publicly advanced involved a combination of circumstances and conduct that took the litigation outside the ordinary and reasonable conduct of civil proceedings, which is pretty damning stuff. And what's interesting is that when you go to court on a no-win, no-fee basis, your case goes out to what's known as the legal insurance market. And so there are lots of people prepared to just chuck money at a case if they think it's going to win, because they're going to get a share of the winnings when it does land. And so whoever has insured this case will have seen that case, will have considered its merits and thought, well, there's a good chance there I'll win X amount of money back if I stake them to go and fight the Daily Mail. And so they will have been sold a presentation by the legal team.
Yeah.
They'll have then seen this case unfold with so much stuff falling apart on the witness stand, and then seen the judge go, well, this was a complete nightmare from top to bottom. Why did it even come to court? It's as shonky as hell. And now the insurers are going to be saying, probably, I don't doubt, going through the small print saying, well, we don't have to pay out because you didn't do what you said you... It wasn't as good a case as we were led to believe. There'll be a bit of buyer's remorse going on the part of those insurers.
Yeah.
So whether they can find a way out of paying the 16 million they've offered to cover or not is going to affect how much of this... And it's not just Harry. He gets all the attention because it's Prince Harry. But there's a dozen claimants there, not all of whom are stinking rich. Many of whom will have been misled, probably, about the quality of that case, and they will all be equally on the hook.
And it's that age-old irony that to look at that small print and to try and claim back the money, who are they going to pay to do that for them?
Some lawyers.
Some more lawyers, of course they are, of course they are. Let's have a look at the Telegraph, Henry, because this is an interesting one. The Mandelson case, as we mentioned in the front pages there, could be about to collapse because the FBI and the DOJ won't play ball. And I should preface this by saying Peter Mandelson, of course, denies the allegations that we are discussing here.
Yeah, so Peter Mandelson, the Met is trying to build a case to prosecute Peter Mandelson for misconduct in public office. This is quite a hard case to prosecute, normally. It doesn't happen all that often. And so, essentially, the argument that the Met is making is that they have received redacted documents, but the redacted documents have so much around them that is ambiguous that essentially they worry that, or some of them, we are getting conflicting reports from the Met in this, even in this very piece, but they're worrying that the defence could just drive a coach and horses through this because you've got, lots and lots of black and then some incriminating-looking sentences, and a reasonable defence counsel can be like, well, Your Honour, I could do this to almost any letter if you let me. So it's not... What isn't certain from this is is the extent to which they have been blocked. We've got there's one source from the Met saying that they're not playing ball and it's probably doom and gloom. There's another one saying, oh, actually we're pressing ahead, nothing's changed. The DOJ in America says that it's not refused to help, but of course that is a press statement that a DOJ that had refused to help would also say.
Yeah.
So it's not clear. I think the fear is, or the theory is, that basically this scandal was enormously damaging to Donald Trump. And they really don't want to start releasing unredacted documents which could bring it back in America.
Yes.
Not refusing to help is not the same thing as just not helping.
Yeah.
And
one day
saying nothing.
Yeah, one day, kicking the can down the road.
We'll do it next week.
Talking of kicking cans, there is actually an interesting picture on the front of the FT of China's robots fighting each other. We're going to discuss that in a moment. Before we do, just very quickly on the other story on the front of the FT, Susie, deficit widens to £1.8 billion. Burnham doesn't get his man for chief economic guru. The bumps in the road have already started.
Yeah, and a lot of this is stuff that, it's events, dear boy, events. These are things that are going to happen to any Prime Minister, whoever is in charge. And when we say 1.8 billion deficit, I go, is that all? Because, America's just ticked up to $40 trillion and we've got a few $1 trillion of debt. 1.8 billion.
I think that was only for July, though.
That's
the
just
deficit in July.
OK, all right, maybe it's a bit much for 4 weeks when half the country was on holiday. But also, Jim O'Neill, who was supposed to be one of Andy Burnham's closest financial advisors, has said that he won't be taking on a formal role. But it's partly because he didn't want to put his money into a blind trust, which is what would be needed if you're going to have a job in government, because you couldn't go and tinker with the money markets while you are advising on the money markets. It's fundamental bit of
Yes.
the job. So he doesn't want to do that. So he'd rather actually just go and play with the money markets rather than talk to Andy Burnham, which perhaps indicates that Jim O'Neill thinks the important end of business is somewhere other than Downing Street.
Fascinating stuff. We'll discuss more of the biggest and best stories from tomorrow's papers in a moment.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Let's head straight back to the papers. At the front of the Daily Telegraph, a smaller story at the bottom, Henry, about a Labour donor calling Andy Burnham's policies piffle. The Labour donor being John Caldwell, who I think has donated to other parties before and is apparently, if the Telegraph's to be believed, considering doing again.
Yeah, so essentially the argument is he's suggesting that Kemi Badenoch is leading the only electable political party in Britain, which would be news to the pollsters. Because like you can argue that like she is leading the only party with a sensible economic policy if you think that, but electable is a condition dependent on public opinion. And the Tories, despite her rising public personal ratings, are still in third place and have been in third place for a very long time. Maybe he's responding to the mood shift. I suspect that's more than anything else, because Burnham's policies, Epiphal, is something you can't really say until he has them.
It's early days.
Until he has them.
Yeah.
And he famously doesn't yet. But I think if maybe you're looking at his sort of back to the 70s rhetoric and getting spooked.
Let's have a look at the Eye. Page 5 has the story, Susie, of Andy Burnham wanting England to bid to host the Men's World Cup, although it is many years in the future. What is it, 2036, I think? When is it?
Neither know nor care.
2038, because obviously we just had the World Cup, so it's going to be...
Okay.
The women's one is
2030, yeah.
Oh, you're not bothered?
No, Burnham arguably says that, it brings growth and it brings a lot of economic investment and tourism and regeneration to areas that are, need doing up and all the rest of it, and it unlocks funding and all the rest of it, and it's absolutely the case. It's the bit of the issue with having to deal with FIFA and that goddamn Infantino slime ball. But I just don't care. And unfortunately, the one thing that I do care about is the fact that if we host the World Cup, it would make the World Cup coverage even more annoying and pervasive and annoying, just awful. Sport is football in particular is soap opera for men. All right, I know women love it too, right? But it's because men have got all these emotions that they're not allowed to talk about, and women do talk about it. They go and take sport, and they let all this upheaval and emotion out with the sport. And it's your soap opera, and I can't stand having it the whole national soap opera as well. Have your thing, do your bit. Saturday afternoon is absolutely fine, but the whole world being your soap opera is a no.
There's only one person getting emotional here right now.
That's because we're suppressing it. We'll go and scream at
exactly. Exactly. Henry doesn't even like football, to be fair. So,
they're both sitting there just like, yes, OK.
It's a fair point. It's a fair point. So you're not a fan of this World Cup bid, then?
Oh, I don't care. I just don't care.
Interestingly, FIFA rules a hurdle for PM, but 2042 could be a realistic goal. So put that in your diaries if you're still around. We've got to finish off on this story, Henry, about robots fighting each other on the front page of the FT. China propels the rise of the robots. I know you love this one. You're all over this stuff. Tell us more. So
essentially, this is one of the things that's really happened in the last year is we're starting to see leaps and bounds for humanoid robots, which for a very long time was something that was almost impossible, very technically difficult to do. And so this is China's basically arranged an MMA cage fight between two functioning humanoid robots. Now, it's a bit slow and clunky because this technology is...
But where's the jeopardy? I mean, who cares?
Well, but the thing... I'm sorry, have you ever seen Robot Wars?
I have not... Well, I'm aware of its existence.
Robot Wars is great. You then have the American version, which is insane, which is basically... Because Robot Wars was made by the BBC, and so it had, budget limits and an educational angle. And then, basically, the American version is just two, $50,000 machines with flamethrowers, going out in an arena. It's spectacular. And this kind of stuff, it starts off humble, but give it 10 years' time when these are full-on robot ninjas, it'll be great.
Surely all they need to do is just reach around the back and flip it off.
And you thought football was a proxy for men's emotions. I think you'll find it's Robot Wars.
Well, it's going to be that.
There you go. It's Robot Wars all the way. Absolute pleasure, Henry, Susie. Thank you very much indeed. Now, just before we head to sport, there's been a very big celebration in Surrey today. The world's oldest living person has celebrated her 117th birthday. Ethel Caterham, who lives in Lightwater, was born in 1909, 5 years, of course, before the outbreak of the First World War. Despite her life experience, she's spent the past year marking some new firsts, including meeting King Charles. After a busy few hours, she said, "I've had a lovely day celebrating with my family and friends, and I look forward to seeing what next year brings." Well, it brings 118, if you make it that far. Incredible statement.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit harsh to say that there's qualify it like that for her.
Well, can you imagine growing up in being born in 1909? Can you imagine growing up in Britain in the 1920s?
It's the technological changes since 1980s baffle me sometimes. So the fact that what will have happened since 1909... Exactly. I'm still very much on Buckaroo. And suddenly, with all this stuff from 1909, it's going to say much.
Lloyd George's showdown with the peers was in the newspapers when you were a toddler.
The invention of the telegram.
The invention of the telegram.
The invention of the telephone. The invention of the television.
It is just mind-blowing. I can say thank you both to you now, absolutely. And look, happy birthday. I mean, what a remarkable age and what a remarkable life that really must have been. Anyway, it's Sport Next, how champions Arsenal eased to victory in the opening game of the Premier League season as they sent Coventry home empty-handed.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. James Matthews from Sky News. Can I ask, why was Ghislaine Maxwell invited to your daughter Chelsea Clinton's wedding in 2010? Maria, did you offer to President Trump your Nobel Peace Prize?
I presented the President of the United States the medal.
Free, wherever you get your news.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
Commute to sacred ground.
David Cameron says that you should vote through funding for Ukraine. What do you say to that?
I really don't care what David Cameron has to say.
Did you stay at the apartment of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody? Mr. Hexter, does your past behaviour make you unfit to serve?
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block. James Matthews, Sky News.
It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir? James Matthews from Sky News, Mr. Mamdani.
I have to be honest, when you said you were from Sky News, I just got very excited. Could you repeat the question one more time?
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Let's get the latest sport now from Vaishali.
Bid has been tabled by Manchester City for Dimitar Berbatov in the last few minutes.
We've made an offer. I think it's agreed between ourselves and Tottenham, and now really it's about the Birmingham decision, I think.
City come in and you're thinking, goodness me, this is another statement from them.
When did you become aware that Manchester City had entered the race?
On the way to the Carrington, then I find out that City are coming in with the offer.
Are you on the phone to Robbie Keane saying, is he signing or not?
Yeah, a little bit.
Did you fear at one stage that he would go to Manchester City?
No, I didn't fear it. If City had snatched that one right at the death, the noisy neighbours would have been absolutely the noisiest ever.
The question now is, which hospital is he going to have his medical? Is it Manchester City's hospital or Manchester United?
My agent is telling me, in the car, someone called him. He's in the front seat. Sir Alex is next to him. I'm in the back seat. So someone is calling him and telling him that. And I'm like thinking to myself, so how do I react here? What do I say? What is Alex going to say? And I'm like, Emil, no. You know where we're going. We know what we came for. It's just one club here. We'll go for United.
If he sort of turned at the last minute and gone to Man City, then it probably wasn't the right player for us anyway. I was confident that he wouldn't go there in the end.
I do think they were trying to get under United's skin. I think it was kind of like, we'll show you. We can certainly challenge you money-wise now. Any player United would have gone for that day, that summer, City probably would have thrown the hat in the ring as well.
Why were you so set on United?
It was like the badge, it was like the history, it was like the players, it was like the legends, it was like the trophies, the manager, the fans, the stadium, the aura.
You definitely joining Man United tonight?
We go to Old Trafford where the offices were. I go in, I see the whole table full of documents ready to be signed, if needed to be signed, but prepared just in case. Then I go to a different room with David Gill, with Sir Alex, my agent, the lawyers. It was up and down through the corridors, to the offices, people talking on the phone. Daniel Levy calling on one line and say, come back right now, we're not letting you go.
I can get frantic and sitting here calmly. I wouldn't like to sort of give you the impression that you don't have to lose your rag occasionally, you don't have to sort of push things or get on with your lawyers or, you know, make certain phone calls. But I think ultimately, you know, if you're experienced in terms of what's required, you can get it done.
My agent is trying to convince him, no, we already had a deal. Then I took the phone and like, Daniel, please, we had a deal, I'm staying here, bam. Then he calls again, a bit more calm down. Okay, maybe we can work something out. Maybe the price was going up at times as well.
Thank you, Vishali. Let's take a look now at the weekend weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
After a cooler and somewhat wetter interlude, mostly fine and settled weather returns at the weekend. It is a chilly start to Saturday morning, though, with some overnight mist and fog patches. Most places will be dry. There are a few light showers possible, mainly around the exposed coasts. The rest of the day should be largely dry with sunny spells. Temperatures will recover to around average after that chilly start to the day. Clouds going to thicken in the northwest later, bringing a few spots of rain and drizzle to northern Scotland and to the west of Ireland. The bulk of the British Isles should stay dry. The odd afternoon shower, though, is possible, especially for parts of Cornwall and across the north of England. Sunday, mostly dry with sunny spells again and light winds, though northwest Scotland and the Western Isles will be cloudier and breezier with a few showers. After another chilly night on Sunday, Monday is set to be fine and dry with bright or sunny spells. Brisk winds will affect southern coasts, bringing a risk of showers later on in the day.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
That was the wrap. Keeping you company overnight here on Sky News' Sam Nass. Have a good weekend. Bye for now.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
This is Sky News, the headlines. A judge slams Prince Harry and his fellow claimants and orders them to pay almost £10 million to the Daily Mail's publisher. The Food Standards Agency warns the public to avoid runny eggs when eating out over salmonella fears. Rising Up, a special report on the women reshaping the hard right of British politics. Argentina fined almost £250,000 after a banner about the Falkland Islands was unveiled at the World Cup. Plus, the Met Office says the next El Nino weather event will be unlike anything ever seen before. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the programme. Prince Harry and his high-profile co-claimants have been ordered to pay almost £10 million to the publisher of the Daily Mail. Harry and 6 other household names, including Sir Elton John, were ordered to hand over the cash to Associated Newspapers after losing a privacy court case. But there could be some better news for the Sussexes' finances, with reports that Meghan is in talks to star in a UK TV show. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
Harry's fight with Fleet Street is over, but his damning defeat against the Daily Mail has a hefty price tag. Prince Harry and his co-claimants are ordered to pay an initial £9.5 million within a week after overwhelmingly losing their case. They have insurance which covers them up to £16.2 million, but the judge, Mr Justice Nicklin, also ruled the publishers of the Mail can claim on an indemnity basis, which basically means they can claim much more. The Mail says their legal costs are £34.5 million, potentially leaving Prince Harry and the other claimants out of pocket by over £18 million.
It's a very bad day for the claimants. What they would have hoped for is a cost order against them on what's called the standard basis, but the judge has made an order against them on the indemnity basis, which means the final allowance in favour of the Mail will be much more generous.
The reason this bill's potentially so big is simple. Harry and his co-claimants lost every single allegation. The court very critical and said their conduct was unreasonable to a high degree, that allegations of the utmost seriousness were advanced without an evidential foundation. The Daily Mail defiantly described the judgment as a devastating critique of an attempt to destroy a newspaper and the reputations of its journalists, editors and executive.
Did your paper do anything unlawful?
But the paper might not end up with as much as they want.
There is a crumb of comfort in the judgment by the judge, who said those costs he thinks are excessive, will have to be carefully looked at. So there's no certainty at all that they will recover anything like that figure.
No comment from Prince Harry, but this has been a deeply disappointing case. The financial hit will hurt, but the greater pain for him, losing his chance to build a case for a second investigation into press reform. Now, he could appeal, but would he want another legal fight following his return to the UK?
The Sussex bank balance takes a blow, but it might be boosted by news Meghan could return to acting.
All I'm hearing about it is that it is something she's very excited about. It's significant enough that it was something that was a big factor in this move.
We understand Meghan is in talks about a part in Guy Ritchie's Netflix show The Gentleman. Starring role or not, the arrival of the Sussexes is likely to bring drama. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
The Food Standards Agency is warning vulnerable people against eating runny eggs in restaurants. Pregnant women, young children and the elderly are being advised to choose well-cooked eggs. The agency has reissued the advice in response to a salmonella outbreak linked to eggs imported from abroad. Emma Birchley has the latest.
So the bottom line with this is that if you're buying eggs that have been laid in Britain, then you should be fine, because it's not thought that they have been infected with salmonella. And you can tell those ones because they have that red stamp on the side, which is the British lion mark. Now, the concern is with eggs that are imported. And the problem is if you go out for a meal, you go to a cafe or a restaurant, you don't know whether those eggs have been imported. Similarly, there are raw eggs in all sorts of different products, like, for example, fresh mayonnaise, hollandaise, also soufflés. So there is the unknown there. Now, for the vast majority of us, it won't cause any particular problems, maybe mild symptoms like sickness, diarrhoea, stomach cramps, maybe a fever. The problem is for particular vulnerable groups. So that's the under 5s, the over 65s, pregnant women, and people with certain underlying health conditions. So, for example, cancer or diabetes. They are being urged to make sure that if they're going out, if they're not sure that that egg is British laid, then to ensure that it is not runny, that it's thoroughly cooked. Now, we've had a statement from Professor Ian Young, who's the Chief Scientific Advisor for the Food Standards Agency. He has said, we're working closely with the UK Health Security Agency and other partners to investigate an outbreak of Salmonella enteritidis. The exact cause has not yet been identified. However, investigations so far have identified links to eggs imported from outside the UK, mainly used by food service and catering establishments such as restaurants or cafes as a potential source. There is no evidence that UK-produced eggs are affected. Now, of course, this is not the first scare we've had with salmonella, and the most famous one, if you cast your mind back to the late 80s, was involving the health minister at the time, Edwina Currie, who incurred the wrath of UK farmers when she said that most UK egg production was affected. It prompted a slump in sales, it prompted millions of hens to be slaughtered and ultimately resulted in her resignation. Now, this outbreak is far, far smaller. We know that one person has died, over 200 have been infected, of whom just over a third ended up in hospital. But people are being urged, if they're vulnerable, not to take any risks, make sure that food is thoroughly cooked if they're out and about, and finally to sign up for food alerts. So if there is a problem with a particular product, there will be a recall and you will be alerted.
Emma Birchley reporting there. Now, Russian drones have struck a shopping centre in central Ukraine, killing 14 people and wounding more than 120 others. It happened in the city of Kryvyi Rih, the hometown of President Volodymyr Zelensky. He says the attack was a double-tap strike, an initial wave of drones hitting the area, followed by a second wave as rescue workers responded.
Authorities are gathering information on everyone who may have been in that shopping centre. This is an absolute atrocity committed by the Russians. They're nothing but beasts. We will definitely respond.
On to some of the morning's other news, and a 6-year-old girl who was pulled from the sea off the coast of Shoreham in West Sussex has died in hospital. Saja El Khawas passed away 3 days after 3 members of her family also died after getting into difficulty in the water. Saja had been in hospital in a critical condition since the incident. Argentina's Football Association has been fined almost £250,000 after players displayed a banner referencing the Falkland Islands following their World Cup semi-final win over England. The banner was criticised by politicians in the UK when the protests took place last month, with the Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey calling for those involved to be suspended. One person has been killed and at least 2 others are seriously injured after a sword attack at a Swedish school. Police in the city of Fagersta said the attack took place yesterday afternoon at Brunel School, and the 18-year-old suspect has been taken into custody. TikTok has agreed to pay $400 million to the US to end a lawsuit alleging its platform violated children's privacy, marking one of the largest ever settlements over the issue. The deal stems from a 2024 lawsuit by the Department of Justice under former President Joe Biden, alleging that TikTok and its parent company ByteDance collected vast amounts of data on millions of users under the age of 13. The US Supreme Court has temporarily allowed construction of the White House ballroom to move ahead. The decision will mean US President Donald Trump's $400 million project can continue as the High Court mulls over a case aiming to stop it entirely. The Prime Minister has insisted that the country can do better in supporting victims of terror. Andy Burnham was speaking at a ceremony marking the UK's first National Day for those impacted by terrorism.
We will fight for you. The government I lead will fight for you too. And I'm sure all of the politicians in the room would say the same. And this is because we understand something that's fundamentally important to recognise, and it's that the state, in my view, has a particular responsibility to you. And it's because the terrorists who attacked you and your loved ones were trying to attack us all. They were trying to attack British values, what this country stands for. And that is why we owe that duty to each and every one of you.
Now, the government is under increasing pressure to ban trade, including the import of produce from illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian farmers say their land and water is being taken by Israeli settlers, and they're struggling to compete with settlements which have greater access to international markets. Our international correspondent, Diana Magnay, reports.
We've seen terrible scenes recently of Israeli settlers laying siege to Palestinian homes in the West Bank and a huge surge in settler violence. It's caused international outcry, but there's been no change in policy towards Israel and certainly no change to the violence on the ground. One of the topics that's being hotly discussed in Westminster and Whitehall, also in the EU, is whether to ban all trade with settlements which are considered by the UK illegal under international law.
Spain has banned imports from settlements in the West Bank. Britain has more responsibility here than Spain. Unlike Britain, Spain was never a colonial power here.
Abdul Karim Fouka has seen a lot in his 73 years. Israel's seizure of the West Bank in 1967 and the huge expansion of settlements since then through his family's farmland. And he has little hope of change.
At my age, I can see that our situation is not good at all. Not good at all. The young people will either go to prison or be killed. That is the future we are talking about.
In the lush Jordan Valley, you can see the promise of this land. Date plantations ripe for harvest. This is rich agricultural soil. Area C, the economic heart of the settlement enterprise. Land and water fiercely contested, but for Palestinians, a losing battle.
Yeah, over there, the last structure in the top, that's the settlers' outpost.
Rashid Kouderi's village of Berdala is hemmed in by Israeli outposts, one on every hilltop.
Many times they're going, the settlers, during the night and destroying our water pipeline, the water tubes.
Yeah.
And when we go in the morning to water our plant, our stuff, it's broken.
He has plenty of videos like this of armed Israeli settlers goading Palestinian farmers, spilling their precious water right in front of them. The logic is simple. Control the water and you control the people, their ability to farm and to survive. In the nearby settlement of Mehola, vibrant citrus groves. Water's not a problem here. Mehola was the first agricultural settlement that Israel set up after 1967, and we understand that some of the produce from here does go to the EU. We don't know if it goes to the UK, and that is from eyewitnesses who say that they were told that particular areas had to have a particular fertilizer or agrochemical on it because it was for export to the European Union.
A lot of that produce, it's grown on stolen land.
After a 4-year investigation, the legal group Global Echo believes that 1 in 6 shipments into the EU contains settlement products, disguised as Israeli goods. The stats for the UK aren't clear, but the only penalty for settlement imports is that they pay a standard tariff. In a written statement, the government told Sky News, "We have given clear advice to UK businesses that they should not engage in economic activity in illegal settlements and warn them of the reputational and potentially legal consequences of any such activities." But the sense from Palestinians on the ground is that they could do more.
They control at least 80% of our land in the Jordan Valley, and they build the settlers' agro-business, and export it outside to the UK and to Europe. That's why it's very important to stop the whole settlers' products that's going to the UK. This is just a small thing they can do it, the UK governorate, and this is what we ask, of course.
Just beyond Mahola, a natural spring reserved for Israeli use. This ancient land is precious to both peoples, its natural resources available to one more than the other. Diana Magnay, Sky News in the occupied West Bank.
Still to come here on Sky News, we look at the increasing number of women getting involved in hard right movements here in the UK and across Europe.
I'm Ed Conway, and in my new podcast, Stuff Matters, we take an object, crack it open, and reveal the world-shaping forces hidden inside. A pair of earbuds. These are at the heart of a geopolitical battle. The humble banana. This is an economic marvel. A child's booster seat. What if they're actually deterring us from having children? Now, if you want to hear more about all of this stuff, come and listen to my new podcast. It's called Stuff Matters.
Now, women are increasingly getting involved in hard right movements across the UK and Europe. They're spurred on by their concerns about immigration and women's safety. Our data and forensics correspondent, Tom Cheshire, went to meet the women leading anti-immigration groups.
Over the last few months, I've been spending time with the women's-only groups that are protesting against immigration. But the voices that shape that identity, that are challenging it, are changing.
They call us far right. I'm not far right. I'm not far from far right. We're brought up in London, where all our friends are all different colour and come from all different places.
These are the Pink Ladies, a group that sprang up after an asylum seeker sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl and a woman last year in Epping.
At the end of the day, right, people that come over here legally, they go through the channels, they pay all the money, they wait all those years to get citizenships. Those people come here, they work, they pay taxes. They are welcome here. You know, they make our country fantastic. It's people that come over on a boat, that do nothing for our country, give nothing back to our country, expect everything, and then go out and commit crime.
The Pink Ladies are a decentralised organisation, with branches in counties all around the UK.
For alien men from alien cultures with zero respect for our way of life.
Their figurehead is Orla Minahan, one of the organisers of the original Pink Ladies in Epping.
You know, a couple of people, not to sort of name people, but have said here, as part of Pink Ladies, that they wouldn't vote for reform because they hire Muslims. Other people said there shouldn't be any migration because these are third world cultures. I'm not saying you believe that, but does that help your cause?
Of course it doesn't help, but look, ultimately, I am not in charge of people's opinions, right? I am here for one specific reason. My specific reason is that that men are coming into this country. Now, even if 1% of them, which is very realistic, 1% of them are, you know, child abusers, rapists, sex offenders, that is too many. Now, we have enough of our own to deal with.
Save our children, no one can argue with that. Correct. As a phrase. I suppose their argument would be that they wouldn't argue with that. How can anyone argue with that? But they would say, is there a risk of demonising immigrants who aren't, you know...
Of course there is.
Yeah.
Of course there is. But that's the thing. The Home Office and the government are responsible for that.
Others, like Lucy White, take it further, turning those concerns into a broader political argument about migration, identity and the future of Britain. I sat down with her away from the crowds a few days later.
I would dedicate my life to this because my ancestors fought in World War II to save our country. And I'm not going to sit back and be demographically replaced and become a minority in my homeland.
I mean, the other thing your ancestors fought against in World War II was a political ideology that did class people on the basis of their ethnicity.
Yeah, but what we say is, if you look at the state of the country now, people would not have fought for this current state of Britain because it's no longer Britain.
These ideas are finding a growing audience. So how does that language take hold? What is driving it?
This is a different form of right-wing activism with a very different image. Social media is crucial to finding new audiences and recruiting more women to the cause.
And when you have those posts that go big, what's that feeling like? Is that
it's good. It brings like a lot of attention to kind of what you're speaking about, which, you know, is always good if you're in these kind of movements.
And when you say these kind of movements, how do you describe the movement?
I mean, I think it should be the norm, the kind of ethno-nationalist movement.
As extreme as Liv's views are, the point here is that she has a very specific audience in mind and the means to reach them. This isn't just the UK. There are similar groups across Europe. Lucreta is one based in Germany.
We have goth girls, we have like more cutesy girls who are very modern, but we also have like girls who like traditional stuff. We have Christian girls.
Maybe some of it and some of the criticism as well as to do with the sort of the branding, especially on Instagram, which sometimes to me seems to have a slight racial overtone in terms of like white girl summer you guys are doing at the moment. I mean, what does white girl summer mean?
It's also just, I think it's just a pop culture thing.
It's a silly internet joke.
It's a pop culture thing, but I think that actually women or men who are assimilated, they don't feel hurt by that.
Like, I don't think people read that and think we want to eliminate everyone who isn't a white girl or something.
The day after I meet Lucreta, I go to Dover. The Pink Ladies have organised another protest. They march towards the beach. The tone seems more assertive than it was at the start of summer.
When women and children are under attack, what do we do?
And it's reaching more people.
Pink Ladies has been growing a lot since we last spoke. We've got over 50 groups now across the country. We've got a lot of women involved. We're growing, and you know, mums want to. They've had enough. We've had enough. Mums want to come out, and they want to save their children's futures.
Some of the faces are familiar from earlier this summer.
The people who moved them are the enemies of this country.
What's new are the explicit links with Restore Britain.
And Restore Britain will hunt them down, we'll find them, and we'll destroy them.
The party's security spokesperson, Henry Bolton, is the guest speaker. Orla Minahane has joined Restore too, and is its spokesperson for Women's Affairs.
I think the rhetoric there is a little more punch to it.
It's a bit more punchy. That's because every day there are stories of rapes. Every day. And I mean, there is not a day that goes by that there isn't a story of some sort to do with a girl being raped, and it's just out of control.
I wanted to ask Orla about her own views on ethno-nationalism. On X, formerly Twitter, she's interacted with an ethno-nationalist called Steve Laws.
Based on what he says online, he's quite ethno-nationalist, and that to me doesn't feel like what this is about.
I think there's a... Look, I think that the discussion around ethno-nationalism is an individual one, right? I don't judge anyone for their views. I don't judge the left for their views. I don't judge, you know, people are entitled to their views. I have my views, and my view and my whole outlook at the moment is completely based around illegal migrant men attacking and assaulting girls. That's all I care about. The ethno-nationalist argument is for another day, for another time, in another situation.
Many of the women I spoke to over the last few months are having that argument now. It is a quick move, from protesting about women's safety to talking about mass deportations on the basis of ancestry. Another way of saying ethnic cleansing. That is an extreme view, and certainly not one shared by most people on this march, for instance. But for those who do, women's groups offer a new way to spread that message. One that looks gentle, but is just as fierce. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.
Time now for a look at the weather.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
After a cooler and somewhat wetter interlude, mostly fine and settled weather returns this weekend. But it's a chilly start to Saturday morning with some overnight mist and fog patches. Most places will be dry, but a few light showers are possible, mainly around exposed coasts. The rest of the day should be largely dry with sunny spells, and temperatures will recover to around average after that chilly start. Cloud will thicken in the northwest later, bringing a few spots of light rain and drizzle to northern Scotland and Western Ireland. While the bulk of the British Isles should stay dry, the odd afternoon shower is possible, especially for parts of Cornwall and also across northern England. Sunday will be mostly dry.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Coming up on Sky News, another look at the morning's papers in the wrap. Now, the Home Office says French police have prevented nearly 200 small boat crossings under a new migrant deal with the UK. The government says the figures from Paris show a 5% increase in the number of crossings stopped by authorities in France since the agreement was signed in April. It comes as footage released by the UK's Border Security Command shows the moment French officers were attacked as they intercepted the launch of a boat. Now, there's been a very big celebration down in Surrey. The world's oldest living person has celebrated her 117th birthday. Ethel Caterham, who lives in Lightwater, was born in 1909, 5 years before the First World War. Well, despite her life experience, which has included living all over the world, she's spent the past year marking new firsts, including meeting the King. At the end of a busy day, she said, "I've had a lovely day celebrating with my family and friends, and I look forward to seeing what next year brings." Happy birthday, Ethel. OK, time now for a look at today's papers and more highlights from the Wrap with Matt Barbet.
It is time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's papers. And the Daily Mail celebrates its court victory over celebrities, including Prince Harry and Sir Elton John, who were today ordered to pay the paper's publisher at least £9.5 million within about a week, I think, after losing a privacy case. The Eye hears that Harry and his fellow claimants could be liable for legal costs of up to £25 million on top of the court order, so that's around $34.5 million. And that hefty bill is also the lead story for The Times. The Daily Mirror says the Duchess of Sussex is being lined up for a role in Guy Ritchie's Netflix series, The Gentleman, which The Sun calls a crime romp. And The Star describes the story as lock, stock and two moaning royals. Elsewhere, The Telegraph reports the police investigation into Lord Mandelson's alleged ties to Jeffrey Epstein could soon collapse. And that's because the US authorities, they say, are refusing to hand over key documents. The Financial Times reports the UK's fiscal deficit grew to £1.8 billion in July. And there's more bad news for Andy Burnham. His top choice for chief economic advisor has turned down the job. Daily Express speaks to a French woman who says migrants are committing crimes in her village, where they've set up a launch site for small boats heading for the UK. Finally, The Guardian reports MPs have accepted almost £400,000 in freebies so far this year. Let's start, Henry, with the Daily Mail, because they're saying they won, and they did, and of course they're going to put it on their front page.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it feels slightly self-indulgent, but you've had a good day, and there's no other news, so you might as well put your court win on the front. It is an interesting one, because a few years ago, Harry was having a really good run in the courts, and I think that the media or the press really felt on it, or looked like it was on the back foot, but that you can go too far. And essentially, the reason for this is that they launched a case, as Susie detailed earlier, which was essentially speculative is maybe a nice way of describing some of the stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
And the reason that things like this exist is to deter people from wasting court time, right? And it's not just about court time, it's also about the fact that if vexatious litigation, as it's called, it can be enormously stressful, it can impose enormous costs, which can be recouped, but during the process it could impose enormous costs. Now, if you're big and ugly like the Daily Mail's parent company, that's fine. But these rules also exist to stop rich and powerful people using the courts to sort of bludgeon their opponents into submission. Yeah. And the British courts have quite a bad reputation for this, to be honest, and especially on things like libel. So it's a very high bill. Obviously, the bill might come down, but there is a reason that that this has been handed out.
Yes, The Times, Susie, talks about the full bill, which could be more than £34 million. And as we were discussing earlier, I mean, that's a massive number. And sure, you've got household names like Sir